What's up? Do you often find yourself stressed or worried about things that are what we might call first world problems? Like maybe upset that you couldn't get the new sneakers you wanted today, or like, I don't know, mad that there was a
Stuck in
long line,
traffic.
someone stuck in traffic, mad about long lines. Well, today, that though, you're in luck. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. We're talking about first world problems today. I'm Dan here with Randy. What's up, Randy?
Yeah, Danny.
Ugh, I'm having some first world problems this morning. I'll tell you that much. Can't
Dude,
think straight.
yeah, it's tough because you know what? Life, despite what problems there are, it has gotten really easy.
Yeah. It had. Well, we were talking about this before, and I think about this a lot. Like, it actually amazes me sometimes. Like, when you think about it, like the problems we have, the things that we like get frustrated about. When you really think about it, like, we're lucky because most people, like literally, most people in the world that exists now cannot even begin to think about those problems. They have way more pressing problems, like the lack of food, medication, and shelter are three big ones, right?
Hmm.
And it's interesting because like, I think about this all the time, like a stupid example, but like, something happens with one of your toilets, so it's broken, you need to get a plumber, but you have another one. Well, there's plenty of people that don't even have plumbing, and like getting mad that, oh, there's only one bathroom available, we have to take turns, geez, or something like that.
What
It's
the
just,
heck?
yeah, it's just funny because it's like, yes, this is our normal reality, so we're still getting upset at things being broken essentially, which is fine, but like when you put it in context or perspective, it's like, wow, should I be upset about this at all?
Hmm. Yeah, it gets pretty absurd because we come to take for granted a lot of stuff, and oftentimes we compare
Everything.
ourselves. Yeah, everything. I know, right? I was being kind. Yeah,
Yeah.
but everything. And we compare ourselves to our neighbors a lot. So it's kind of like this keeping up with the Joneses type of thing. So in America, most of us are fortunate enough where we live a middle class or upper middle class lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so, you know, not any real lack of food, not any real lack of entertainment, not any real lack of like cars or anything. I remember there was a book called Factfulness that takes a look at like the world's population. And it's like if you have a stove, running water, a motorcycle or better, and I think a bed, then you're in the top, I don't know, percentile of the world.
Oh, dude, whenever I teach social ethics or environmental ethics, I always would tell my students about like these statistics. And this is another good one. It's a little old though, so I'm sure the numbers have changed, but it was like 20, yeah, 13 or so when I first used it. But the stat was 6.5 billion people have access to a smartphone with the internet. 4.5 billion people have access to a toilet. Think about that to plumbing.
That's why
So
people
like,
are dumping all over you on social media.
yeah, right. But you think about that though, and that is like a crazy statistic, right? And like,
Mhm.
and it's interesting because I think when you start to put these things in perspective, also like I think one of the other stats, and again, this is a little outdated, so the numbers have changed, but it was like I think it was one third roughly of the population lives on less than $2 a day. And that's like
Mhm.
what? Like what is that? Like 3 billion people roughly, give or take. And think about that. $3 a day or $2 a day. Like that is nothing. I can if I go to work, I spend $2 probably in gas. And like, it's insane.
But this was one of the things that one of the reasons that I want to do this episode because I think in America we take a lot for granted because there aren't very good examples of poverty. Like, sure, there are some poor people and there are those poor places where you stay away from, but like it's not really in your face unless you live in San Francisco, I guess. But uh, you
Well,
know,
we try.
there
Well,
were.
that's a good point, right? Is that a lot of places in the US make a concerted effort to keep those things away and out of sight, like out of sight, out of mind. And they
I
do,
mean, dude, look
lots.
at look at Rambo First Blood. Rambo was a freaking Vietnam War hero
Yeah.
drifter, and the police wanted to keep him out of town because he didn't want drifters there, and he drew first blood. I mean,
That is a great anecdotal story too about what
yeah,
really happened in the true history of Rambo and the Vietnam War.
absolutely. Yeah, but like so like one of the things is traveling, you get to see a whole bunch of stuff that is kind of like it's pushed out of where you would your normal view. Like you might see it on the news, and of course they make this like big thing about it, but it's like it's not really real when it's on the news. And then you see people like living in slums, and you see people who would really do anything for money. And it's just like, you know what? Having what I have is pretty good.
Yeah, and the crazy part, you don't even have to travel outside of the US. You can just travel around the US. I mean, but even I always like to like one of the things I always loved about traveling too, especially outside of the country, is like you also just get to see the reality that no matter where people are, no matter how much they have, they're all trying to do the same thing, just like live their best life that they possibly can, given whatever situation they're in. And it's like once you realize that, it is so much easier to like kind of be grateful for what you have, I think, too. Going back to also your point, like, you see this in your face and it's like, wow, that is real. Like, how am I upset
Mm-hmm.
about, that they didn't have the white card and when I went to go get a car, and now I'm mad because I have to wait a week or something?
Sure.
It's like,
My neighbor got the newest model and I have last year's model. What the
yeah.
heck? What's wrong with this world? How could he do that to me?
Well,
Yeah.
it's funny too, because this comes up a lot. Like I noticed, like we talked before about how much like we both learn a lot. We like doing new things, and like there's so many times where like I will catch myself being like, I'm never gonna learn this. This is ridiculous. Or this is so hard. And it's like, dude, I am so lucky to be able to even do this or try it. Or, I'm so lucky to live in a time where these things are now easier, like, and
Mm-hmm.
doable. Like, think about even
Dude.
like there's so much stuff you can do now that you just could not do like in the past.
Yo, you make such a great point because, like, I mean, with the coding stuff that we do, I remember back before, like, learning coding back before YouTube and when
Oh
the
God.
internet was in its infancy. And, like, I would get a book on Perl and, like, try and go through the book. And it was the most frustrating thing ever because
No
stuff would
help.
not work out like it was in the book. And then you'd be out of resources. And it's like, all right, awesome. That was a great learning experience.
Dude, it literally like your ability to learn was slowed so much because of that lack of resources. Like I remember the first coding course I ever took was web development in high school, and it was just HTML. It's all that existed.
Mhm.
And it was like so hard to get things to be the way you wanted, so hard to get things to look the way you want. Like it was just difficult. And like you said, there was not a lot of resources. Like I was in a class, so that did help, but like,
Mhm.
and that's why I didn't like pick it up as much afterwards. But now it's like, yeah, and that's the other crazy thing. Like, even when I remember when we went to college, like the internet had just basically gotten, starting to get used. I think AOL, like an instant messenger was out, but like you can go online and just get books and articles, and research and stuff. So like, we were going to the library still. And I think about that a lot because it's like now, like, you don't even have to leave your desk. You can do as much research. It's insane. Like the amount of information we have access to,
You
the
can get
amount
a
of like
whole degree without even going to
yeah,
school.
dude, literally. And like it's just amazing. Or like, if you want to do a home improvement project, you remember when you had to actually like go ask somebody how to do it or hire someone? Now you just go,
Mhm.
there's a million YouTube videos like that are good to show you how to do it. Like it is really incredible how we can take on all these things, try out all these things so easily because the bar for entry now is so low. Like there's that information's there. You don't need to purchase it. You don't need an expert. Like you can just, they're available. It's really impressive.
Mhm. Oh yeah, I agree. Another thing that is really interesting. So, like, I think I told you about this, how I was watching something on Marcus Aurelius and it was talking about him being a Roman emperor and how, like, at that time, Rome thought that the cosmopolis of Rome was the entire world. Like, there
Oh,
was
heck
nothing
yeah.
outside of it. Yeah. And so I laugh because I look at us on Earth thinking that, like, we're the only world. But, like, when you start looking at the reality of the known universe that we actually know,
How big
Earth
is
is
it?
like
Yeah.
the most
It's insane.
minuscule, teeny little thing ever. And yet, like, that always helps me put stuff in perspective because I
Yes.
blow it completely out. I'm like, my life is so blah, blah, and this, and those people have that, and it's not fair, and whatever. And then I look at like a little bit about how big the Earth is in the universe, and I'm just like, ah, oh, thank goodness. There it is. It
Dude,
means nothing.
how big the universe is and how little we know even about our own solar system.
Yeah.
Like we
I mean,
haven't
it's
even like it's
yeah.
amazing.
I wish I knew the stats because they are mind-boggling. But it's like, you know, the Earth compared to the sun, you can fit like millions of Earths inside of the sun.
Isn't it like
Okay?
350 million or something?
Something. And and so that's one star. The next nearest star, Alpha Centauri, is I think it's like four some light years,
Yeah,
which
it's
is
like four I
the
usually hear, yeah.
yeah. So like if you light travels around the Earth, I think somewhere between like 4 and 7 times in a second.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a lot.
travels around the entire Earth that many times in a second. Okay. So that speed going for 4 years plus, and you're at the next star. Okay.
Yeah.
Between which there's nothing. There's just like nothing, empty
Nothing.
space, nothing. And then in our galaxy, I think there's billions of stars. So
Yeah.
like that happens billions of times in our galaxy, and our galaxy is not the only one.
No, that's the dude. That is the crazy part. Like when you start thinking about just when you look at the distance with our own galaxy, then you look at other galaxies and how far they are, and like how many. There's like I don't even forget. I forget the last count I saw. There's so many. I mean, like it just puts things in perspective about the insignificance, you know?
Dude, not to mention that like the concept of the Big Bang, that like all of these galaxies and stars that can fit millions of Earths inside of them, all the concept is originally it started at a point smaller than like the tip of a needle. All of the matter, everything, all of you, all of your
Yeah.
friends, all of your families, your descendants, everyone that ever existed, every world, everything that ever existed ever started in this teeny little thing that was superheated and then somehow exploded. And here's the
You
Earth.
know it's cool? This is just a kind of a tangent, that's okay. But I love the pre-Socratic. So this is philosophers like around Socrates' time or before. Most of them are like natural philosophers. They were interested in like how things came to be the way they were without like referring to religion or myth, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And so it's interesting. Some of them had really interesting ideas. Like Anaxagoras, I think it might have been him, if I'm remembering correctly. Um, he had like this idea of evolution, and they even like some of them even suggest because they were thinking of like they thought or they recognized that things had to come from like a primordial soup to get to here. So I think he says at the beginning, he says all things were contained like in this thing and all. And what he means is that the potential for everything had to already exist there, right? Or you couldn't have everything else. So it's like not quite the same as Big Bang, but I always liked it because it is like it's that similar
Yeah.
idea, right? Even though it's,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty interesting,
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
And
But
so we come to that, to being in this world. And so like nowadays it's very easy to think that life sucks and is hard and is terrible because it's so freaking good.
here's the other thing that's interesting too, because when you mentioned this topic, the one thing I was thinking about was like the thing I love about philosophy is like I always got drawn to the good life, like this issue of like, well, what is good life and all. And every philosopher, I think, crucial to their view is usually like, getting clear on what really matters. Because that is really it. Like, think about how much time we waste by stressing about stuff, by being little bitchy and stuff, and being miserable. And all we're hurting is ourselves. When we could be doing something positive, we could be interacting, we could be relaxed, we could be doing so many other things. But we let ourselves have these pity parties instead of doing like something that would benefit us. And it really all comes down to like what really matters and recognizing like how much value things really have. Saying to yourself like, okay, yeah, this might suck that they don't have, they only have the white card, but like, let's be honest, what's a week, right? Waiting for this thing, or like recognizing like, the distances between all these things, the cosmos is so huge that in reality we are really insignificant. This is one planet that eventually won't exist anyway. Humans eventually won't exist. So I think
Mm-hmm.
getting clear on this is such a helpful way too to kind of ground yourself and keep yourself present. So you don't have these swings into this, you know, first world problems and getting like upset about everything. And, for no when it's just really not necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a difficult one because like we have, I think part of it is just because we have so much spare time nowadays.
Yeah.
Like, reading about history, it's like people spent so much time just barely scraping by in survival. Like they would literally spend all freaking like I was thinking about
Dude,
this because life was actually gamified back in the day. You know how like when you're playing a game and it's kind of like frustrating, but not bad enough to make you rage quit, but it's kind of like frustrating. You're like, oh, I can almost get this. And then you finally get it and you're like, yeah, I got it. And you want to keep playing. Well, like life used to be that way where we'd be like, oh, I'm hungry. Let me go find some food. This looks like, oh, nope, nothing over there. How about over here? Oh, yeah. Oh, did you see that herd of buffalo? Oh, we just missed him, but I bet there's another one around the corner. And like literally, life was gamified until maybe like 100 years ago. And all of a sudden, we're just like, oh, I'm hungry. Okay, let me
well,
order something. And that's it.
that's the other thing though, because I was thinking about this the other day too, is that progression in time, like the progression in development happens so fast. Dude, I was watching something the other day. It was like they were talking about like, I don't know, it was like 1860 or 50 or something in the US. And I was like, it, I always think of that time period as being so much longer ago. Because like it's like they're on horses and they have like pitchforks and like some guns maybe, but like not a lot. Like
Dude,
it's
and
just amazing to me.
you died of like a bacterial infection.
Dude,
Like that
I
was the
was
major
yeah,
killer.
I just learned like not too long ago that it wasn't until the 1940s that they realized babies born with jaundice need water and light, sunlight. And I was like, think about that. I was like, dude, I was born like 40 years later. And like it's just that amount of time would have been the difference between me having a life or dying when I was infant. And it was just something like that. Like it's
Dude,
amazing when you think about it. Like,
and like so many people died from toothaches, from like unbearable pain and then an infection that killed them. And it's
yeah.
totally preventable
No, I mean, and it's just like, yeah, when you think
or
about it, it's
treatable.
amazing. And like that time too, you know, when we look back, it's like 100 and, 150 years, 200 years. That is nothing on the timeline of like just reality. It's just nothing. Like the
Hmm.
Earth's gonna be way, no, it's not even that long in the timeline of humanity, you know. And if you
Yeah.
look at it too, us being like civilized and smart, that's the very small part of like our larger history. Like it's crazy when you look at it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, like I love reading sci-fi books from like before 2000
Yeah,
because they all talk about these like video phones as they're this out there thing that like you can communicate with each other. Wrap your mind around this. You have a
yeah,
little handheld portable device that you can talk with somebody else with. And
and
it's
see
like,
them maybe.
I know, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, this is sci-fi. Just try and believe it. It's like
just
we're
trust
living
us.
that stuff.
Yeah, it is great. It's nuts though, but that's just it. Like, and I don't know, it just amazed me too. Like, but at the other hand though, and this is the other thing that always gets me, it's like they are still our problems though, and that's always the problem because, you know, all of us, everybody, we experience the world from our perspective, right? I mean, it's hard for us to even really grasp the concept that other people have internal worlds of their own.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, most of us don't think like that. It's just hard to.
Hmm.
And so when you think about that, it's like it also makes sense why we get so stressed about these things that don't really matter larger in the larger picture because it still feels like it matters to us.
Yeah. I mean, there's no hierarchy of suffering. So like, even though we are living in a first world and somebody else is not, you have problems, they have problems, it both sucks. And like the thing about life is there's always going to be problems. So
Well,
like trying to understand that and learn how to live with there always being problems.
well, you make a good point, right? Which is the problems that we experience are situationally and contextually dependent, right? So like even though I might even the problems I might have, somebody could never dream of them, in other places. The reality is that, and even though I could help them very easily, the reality is we are in two different places with two
Hmm.
very different sets of problems, but they are problems, right? In the world
Yeah.
we created. Yeah.
Yeah. I had so like every once in a while the stuff that comes out of my mouth kind of surprises me in a good way. So like
That
like
happens.
the more work I do on this on my own, like I mentioned, I'm doing this self-compassion type thing. The more I recognize it, like, other people when they're doing crazy stuff, it's not some character flaw in them. It's probably some type of situational thing. So like there was a situation a couple of weeks ago where somebody was just acting like pretty crazy. And the first thing, without anything, but the first thing that came out of my mouth was like, wow, you must be really having a bad day, huh? And of course,
Right.
they were like pissed off and they just got angry at me, like, no, I'm not having a bad day. And like, but it's like, it probably was. They were just having a bad day. And like,
Yeah.
that's what happens all the time, I'm
But
sure.
but no, to your point though, right? Most of the time when that other people do stuff like that, especially that we don't know, right? We assume that's the person, not the situation. And I
Hmm.
think that is a mistake we make all the time. Whereas when it happens to us, we always assume it's the situation, not the
Always
person.
a situation. Yeah.
Right? And it's kind of funny
Uh-huh.
if we just extended that same because we like, if something happened to us and like I couldn't do something because like I don't know, I was really sick or something happened and you didn't understand, I'd be mad at you, big dude. Like, like I'm sick, what do you want me to, and like, but if it was a stranger, it'd be like, oh, that person just can't get their work done. They're always procrastinating. It's like it's kind of funny that we make this. I think like if we flip that and actually thought of the person more, we might, or the situation more as probably causal factor, we might do better treating people.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah,
said very
absolutely.
poorly.
No, I get what you're saying. We're like that's the difficult thing is recognizing that people are situationally like I forget the exact thing, but it's something like same person, different day. we're all basically the same person. We're just living a different day. Like some people are living a day where you feel great and wonderful and everything's working out perfectly. And some people are living the day where life is a living hell. And it's just
Yeah.
like, which person are you encountering today?
Dude, I remember, and this is actually a true story. It's going back a while. But I remember being in a store and this register person was ringing people out, and like she kept looking at her phone, and people were getting all upset, like because she kept glancing at her phone, glancing at her phone. And everybody's like, "Oh, she's not doing her work. She's blah blah blah." And it's like, and I was with them getting mad. It's like, what is she doing? Like on social media or something? Well, it turned out somebody did like one of the coworkers came up and asked her. Her family member was in the hospital, and they were worried about they were gonna make it. So of course, like she still had to work. I mean, arguably she probably should have, but whatever. But she still was working. They didn't know the situation yet. But it's like we couldn't be easier on her because
Yeah.
but we don't know the situation. I think we always jump to blaming the person rather than like maybe something's going on that just might be more important than how fast I get out of the store, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the crazy thing is, like, some people can't leave work. Like, as much as nice as it would be to leave work and spend time with family, some people can't because they literally need that paycheck to pay for their rent, or else they're living out on the street,
Yeah,
something
and
like
there's
that.
plenty of jobs where you don't get paid if you don't work.
Yeah.
Like there's plenty. So
Another thing that we share with each other this week was that is saying from I think it's Krishnamurti that it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And it's crazy because like so often I'm just like, I do not fit in this world. Like there's something wrong
nope.
with me where I do not fit. And I'm like, hang on, this
Ain't
world is falling
everybody
apart.
else?
Yeah. Clearly it's
Hold on.
everybody else.
Wait a minute.
Not me, it's everybody else. Yeah. But it just
No.
might be. Because like you look at it, I mean, I heard these like staggering statistics just about health. Yeah, it was about health. Because actually, I'm listening to this really good book called Arete, which is about like virtue. It's this
Greek word for virtue.
hugely
Yeah.
long book,
Arete.
451 topics. He basically like summarizes every book that's ever been written, but it's a lot of useful hints. And so like he's talking about kind of mental health and stuff like that and how a lot of it is related to our physiology. And actually that was where that quote came from. And it was saying how like we live in a world where two-thirds of people are obese, people don't walk anymore, and they found that like a minimum you need like at least 5,000 steps a day for your mental well-being, and most people in America do not reach that. Most people are on like four, especially over 60 or something, like they're on at least 5 prescription medications.
Some
Like,
counteracting other medications are on. Like it's insane. Yeah.
yeah, so like we have this crazy unhealthy society, and our like and we're so focused on like the brain, but like our GI tract makes more serotonin than our brain does, and
Yeah.
people have these terrible diets. So it's like all this stuff is all messed up, and it's like no wonder it's so hard for anything to work properly these days.
Yeah. It's funny. Whenever I teach ethics, I always tell my class and like question morality, but also ask yourself, like, is it possible to be moral even in this? Like, is it possible that maybe our system's so messed up you can't be? Maybe like the only way to really fix it would be to redo it, essentially, change everything.
Dude.
Because it could be the case, right? I mean, it could be that we just, I mean, if you look at all that's happened in recent human history, population explosion, explosion of technology and advancements in many ways. But those things are and any technology it's ostensibly neither good nor bad. It just depends on how we use it, right? It can be used for good or bad. Everything can be. And so looking at it that way, it's interesting to ask yourself, like, it could be going in a direction that just isn't good. And that we just don't fit in it, that we just aren't part of, I mean, it's totally possible. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is a mess.
Yeah, I was laughing today because I was talking with a French guy, and French guys love talking about politics. Like in France, politics is like the best thing ever.
Oh
And
yeah, they're all very
so
informed too.
yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so he was talking about, some US politicians or whatever. And I just think it's so comical how in the US we think we're so forward thinking until it comes to politics where we only have two parties because that's what we've always done, and clearly we had it right from the beginning.
And we pay attention to nobody else's world, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a mess.
Uh,
It
yeah.
is. Well, and it's funny, even in the beginning, they thought we shouldn't have two parties.
Yeah.
I mean, they literally, one of the founding fathers said, I think, said that, like, that we shouldn't have two.
Dude,
We should have more than
I'm
two.
sure the only people who really enjoy us having two parties right now are the Russians because they can just pit us against each other on social media.
Yeah, I really think we have one. I don't think we even have two parties. I think they're
Yeah.
basically the same thing, is what it is. They
Yeah.
keep each other
So
in business.
the topic today was politics. Is that
What the hell is the topic? Yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
know,
first
right?
world problems, right?
First
Um,
world problems.
yeah. It is. It's just, it's funny. I don't know. I think that's the hardest thing though, is getting things in perspective. And even like that is another one. Like, like we don't, Americans tend not to look outside even their world, right?
Hmm.
The US for anything. We don't look at much other, what's going on in countries. We don't pay attention. And I think that's the other thing, like expand that perspective so you can see what's going on around you.
You also got to question, like everything is, uh, our ego just wants to look good, to feel
Oh,
good, to do stuff, different stuff like
sorry.
that. And
I'm glad you
I
mentioned
would
that.
this
Yeah.
book Arete is like a really good book, except for that he goes way overboard with virtue signaling. Like he
I
talks
hate that.
over and
Yeah.
over again how he's had successful businesses that he sold, how he donates large sums of money to poor people and they say bless you and thank you God and all that stuff. And it's
I
just
hate
like it's awesome that you're donating, but you didn't need to tell people how much you donated and that this like rocked their world. That doesn't
Yeah.
do anything for anyone except for yourself. And
Which means you're doing it for yourself and you don't really
mhm,
care about helping
yeah,
those people. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Which is
exactly. So it's
exactly
like,
it.
but it's like that you run this is what like the problem with the ego is that like it's very good at hiding.
Well, dude, I was just thinking of this too, because I think about this a lot. Like all the people in the world struggling, suffering, and all, and like there's no reason for it. Like there's no reason why we couldn't all work together and fix things. Like literally. The only thing
Hmm.
stopping us is
There's enough food
un
and money.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like we could, and there's enough technology. We could literally share and stuff, but we don't because, you know, each country is like it wants to be sovereign and it wants to protect its own. It's that ego, right? The country's ego, and then you have the individual ego. And it's like there's no reason why anybody has to have a bad life, but we make it so that we can look at them and say, well, I'm better. I must be
Hmm.
doing better, even though I'm still unhappy too. But at least
Yeah.
I'm not. And I swear to God, I think that's it too. It's really crazy.
I think this whole like thing for like nationalism and whatever is just it draws upon our nature, our basic instincts to like you hear about like the ducks or the geese or whatever they get imprinted when they're born for like whatever
Yeah,
is their
yeah.
the mothering thing. How like we're naturally attracted to things that kind of look like us or around us when we're children. And so like that
Or
like
just that we're
naturally
familiar
yeah,
to
exactly.
us.
That natural, like that extended upon itself naturally just breeds this nationalism, racism type of stuff.
Yeah, I love it. And Nietzsche had a quote where he says like, politics makes you stupid, and like, and it does because like anytime you group, you say this is me, that's them. You become stupid because you close off your ability to see from other perspectives, and you
Hmm.
assume that one's right when they're all constructs. So yeah, and I
Hmm.
totally agree with you. And it is funny because like, dude, we see it so often where people dig in on things that don't even make sense just because that's what their group's supposed to believe. And
Hmm.
it's like it makes you so incapable of seeing like how to like better the situation in a way that would actually work and like do things commonsensical or anything. Like it is. It's just look at how ineffectual our political system is, the whole thing, you
Hmm.
know? Yeah, it's a mess.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, yeah. I don't know what the answer is because
What's it, first world problems or politics or what are we talking about?
yeah,
Which one?
all the whole
All of
thing.
it.
I'm trying to figure it all out.
I know, there's not an answer. That's the hard, well, there's the hard thing about, like I always like Plato's allegory of the cave, right? Because the prisoner in the cave think that's their whole world, right? And I always thought of like everybody's in these caves, right? You have like your family cave, your community cave, your nation cave, all these things. And if we don't get outside of them, we never grow. Like we never, those problems will always be real to us. They'll always be the most important thing because it's in our cave and it's the only world we know. And that's like first world problems. If you don't expand your perspective and get perspective, you can't properly prioritize and assess these values and understand how important things really are, which is not to diminish the fact that these are still problems and they're still important. It's just putting into context how important it really is and also being grateful for the situation you're in. To even have that problem sometimes is a good way to do it.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good way to wrap it up.
All
Summarize it.
right, there you
Got to
go.
get out of your cave.
Get out of your cave. First world problems, right? And that is a
Hmm.
first world problem.
Hmm.
This is the
Yeah.
Existential Stoic podcast. Thanks for listening. If you like, check what that you can just listen where you get your podcasts. Watch us on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe. Helps us out a lot. We'll be back later this week with another episode. Until then, though, we're ready.
Later, Danny.